Hi, I'm Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, here we are once again, West Point, Mississippi, home of Mossy Oak brand camo, the Gamekeeper studio.
Heating up out there, isn't it, Bob?
It is hot outside. It was 96 when I walked in.
Ah,
That's hot.
That's hot.
Yeah.
We need some rain, don't we?
Expletive.
And there's not, when you look at the 10-day forecast, it may be on that 8th or 9th day.
Let's change the topic.
Yeah, let's do.
So depressing.
I wonder why he walked in with his lip poked out, and I knew he didn't get any rain.
Texas has been ill lately.
It's the rain thing.
Last summer spoiled us bad.
Yeah,
it was perfect. You had exactly one rain every single week for the whole summer.
And this heat is kind of different. It's like we got, what is it, lower humidity or
I don't know
higher
what it
pressure?
is. I don't like
It's
it.
different.
Humidity was lower.
Yeah,
Dry, too dry.
different. Too dry. That's right.
I did get my water well fixed at the house, so I got water in the yard. I didn't lose my yard at my plants, and that's good. But
Yeah.
It is good.
my crops,
Gamekeepers
my
need
wildlife,
rain.
my Gamekeeper crops do not look good right now.
Well,
We do. I'd say that we have a good crop of sunflowers. We got them early. They got the roots down deep in that old
Prairie dirt.
black dirt, and they look pretty good.
that's
actually.
good to hear. Maybe
They're
we'll
pretty
get
drought tolerant. They're pretty hardy.
I saw some of that from a distance. When
Just
we were-
sprayed them. They hadn't had time to take effect yet, but they're starting to.
Nice.
Lanny, maybe we'll get an invitation.
Maybe.
To the dove shoot.
Never know.
Yeah.
I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Depends on if we have a good many. If we don't have many, y'all are welcome to come.
Yeah, there we go. All
Every
right.
time.
Well, it's game on now today.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, look, today we've got a really interesting guest. We've got Dr. Craig Harper,
All right.
Y'all don't have very many people come on.
and you're with the University of Tennessee and in the Extension Department, if I've got that correctly. And
Go Vols.
And well, wait a minute now. Let's not. So we have, we've been around wildlife management for a number of years. I'm going to say close to 30 years.
Yeah.
And your name, we've watched you from afar, and we've read and seen, and to have you here, sitting here right now to talk to us, this is very exciting.
Look at Bobby. He doesn't look like a stalker at first
But he
glance.
is.
So,
Yeah, but look, Marcus Lashley, they all spoke so highly of you.
The privilege is mine. I am very happy to be here with you.
No, but seriously, I've been reading your stuff for years since before.
okay, we have another stalker too.
Yeah. We all have our heroes, but you and like Dr. Damaris and y'all helped start it all for me.
Yeah.
Well, look here, guys. I knew I was going to like him when he pulled up last night. It was a little older truck, and in the back, he said, "Hey, is my chainsaw and all this going to be okay?" In the back, while we went to eat lunch, and I looked in the back of the truck. There's a chainsaw, a backpack sprayer, a drip torch, a
That's
bottle
what
of
I'm talking about.
herbicide,
Some conservation
couple
in
of
action.
Man after my
Standard
own heart.
operating equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know when you're going to need a drip torch in the middle of the summer.
No, isn't that
You
true?
were talking about the lower humidity. We were burning last week, 96 degrees with only 48% humidity in Kentucky. Did very well.
I bet it burned
I bet
real
it
well.
did.
Got rid of all them
I
ticks.
know a lot of people think those PhDs sit in an office all day and
Not this one.
crunch numbers, but not based on your tan and all that junk you had bouncing around in the back of your truck. I would disagree with that.
Yeah.
I
on
had
jeans
to
and
get
work boots.
I got pulled out before they got through this morning, but I had to walk in the woods with him this morning in the fields, and I could have listened to him all day. Hopefully,
We had a
we'll
good
get to
time.
listen to him now.
Before we get started, this is the 99th episode.
99.
Yeah, we're in this process of giving away a bunch of really nice prizes. Dr. Harper, it's a shame you can't win any of them, but we do have some parting gifts.
Yeah, we do
for
have
you.
parties. That's right.
So
Always.
we've got Jason McKellar's here somewhere, and he's got a question for us, so we'll have a code for the next.
And this is the last question?
No, this is the second to last.
Second
So
to last.
This
No,
one is for
no,
the.
what?
This is it, 99.
What about the grand prize?
We'll announce all the winners on the 100th episode with the grand prize. There's no question for the grand prize.
Oh, okay.
So everybody gets
So,
put in for the grand
every
prize.
time you enter your answer for the question, you get an extra turn to win the grand prize.
For the bottomland brownie.
Out of Toxie's safe. Yep.
Answer all
maybe.
4 questions and 4 chances.
Well, I have gotten absolutely none of them right yet, so maybe today's the day for me.
So today we're playing for a Gunner Kennel Gamekeeper edition. And guys, if you got a dog, you
take
got to
that.
have one of those
Man,
kennels.
they're amazing.
Undestructible. I mean, they're unbelievable equipment, no doubt about it.
Well, you see all the time he posts pictures of trucks that are in accidents and how the truck is demolished, but the dog survives because he's in that crate.
Yeah.
That is just an unbelievable selling point.
They're
Did-
amazing
yeah.
product.
Great stuff.
And Toxie, you
Great partner
met
for us.
Addison a number. He's hunted with.
He's
I mean,
a great guy. We've already talked about him.
and you got to hunt with RC Gunner.
Yep, sure did. On
Yeah.
one of his last, might have been his last hunt or second last hunt he ever was on. Yep, it was pretty inspirational. As a dog nut myself, it was very inspirational.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bet so.
Awesome product, awesome people.
Yep.
Good stuff.
All right, so we're
So-
going to have we got a question. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, so
All right.
just to clarify too, you have until the 30th, Thursday, to enter this. Thursday morning, we're going to cut it off, so you can even go back, listen to the old ones, still enter your answers.
June
Go to
30th.
the Gamekeeper, MossyOakGamekeeper.com website.
That's
Click
right.
on the
You'll
So
see.
when this airs, you've got 2 more days.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so this question, how many million acres does the National Wildlife Refuge System manage?
Oh my goodness!
How many?
I'm gonna
million?
miss this one too.
In millions.
Millions. Okay.
National Wildlife Refuge System. Just National Wildlife Refuges?
Yeah, I think just National Wildlife Refuges.
Let
don't
me
have a
think
clue.
here.
Is Lanny Googling?
I'm
the question?
googling it.
I will
I'm not
go-
gonna miss another one.
Yeah. I remember when International Paper sold out, it was like 6 million and something acres of land, and it's tremendously bigger than that. So,
Obviously, you're talking about the refuges, not national parks and
Right.
all that, just the National Wildlife Refuge System.
You're still pretty low.
150 million.
150.
You looked at Wikipedia.
Yeah.
This comes from their website. So,
95 million. There's another answer on here.
yeah.
95 million.
95 million.
95 million.
Lanny got.
I'm gonna have to give.
an open book test.
I'm not gonna call
Lanny.
it Google. I'm gonna call it Goggle. Goggle.com got it for me. That's an appreciation for Max and Goggle.com.
Well,
Google.
finally, Lanny gets a.
That's kind of
A question,
anticlimactic. I didn't even pitch an answer, and Lanny cheated.
well, we got the prize for the.
Yeah.
And enter 95. Don't enter million, just 95.
95 is the
95.
answer.
Spell out 95 or the.
No, number 9 and number 5.
Okay.
Can you remember all the answers?
If I had enough time, I probably could.
Okay.
And isn't that great? How much land is being conserved now?
It
That's-
is.
Great point.
First thing crossed my mind when that bigger number came up. It's like, that's crazy. We have such a resource.
And that doesn't include national forests.
That's
right.
Hey, and that's all. What it,
WMAs, that is just national wildlife refuges.
and that's when it Roosevelt.
Yeah. Do we owe that to Theodore Roosevelt?
Yes.
It was
Yep.
his.
And you think like the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is 500,000 acres. That's a big chunk. And how many of those then you consider comprise the acreage for the National Wildlife Refuge System? So that's a bunch of Great Smoky Mountain National Parks.
Sure is.
That's a bunch. Yep. 200 to be precise.
Wow. Look at Toxie over there showing off with his math skills.
So the answer is 95.
I can cipher.
95. All right. 95 on episode 99.
So we've given you the answer. Enter it.
All the winners on the 100th episode.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That sounds fun. All right.
And we can't win. Bobby, you're not going to get the shotgun.
No, I'm not going to get the shotgun. So, I'm hoping we can pull that thing out of his safe without.
He might not.
He
Get
keeps on and on about my A5, and I've told the public from the first moment I don't even own one. I do not.
He's going to give you one, then take it away from
I've got
you.
a Maxis. I've got a Gold. I've got a bunch of Browns, but I do not have an A5.
Yeah, we got
Well,
it.
we know
That's
we
the
got
Bobby. Yeah, that's
didn't know yet.
Bobby's safe, 'cause Bobby's got one.
Yeah, we got it. So-
Bobby goes nowhere without his A5.
All right, guys. So look, this okay. We got through that. We got through all those questions. Now let's get down to business.
Yes.
And we've got Dr. Harper. Can I call you Craig?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
I
So,
bought my ticket. I want to listen to the man talk.
I've
Bobby.
already
We've
told
listened
you that
enough of
several
this stuff.
times.
well, so a few weeks ago when Marcus was here, he dropped the bomb that you were working. You had some cutting edge data that showed that perhaps mowing clover was not as beneficial as people once thought it was. So can we start there and learn what you've learned?
Sure. We'll start with one of the most emotional topics right off. I mean, it's striking. You can talk about using fire during the summer. You can talk about cutting trees. You can talk about shooting does. You can talk about all these different things. But I question if anything draws as much emotion out of people when you tell them that, one, you don't need to mow your perennial forage plots as often as they might think. Not to say you should never mow them, because you should. And number two, you shouldn't mow your old fields, early successional areas to maintain succession, because you don't get the best result out of that for a vast majority of species that you would manage for. That right there draws, just raw emotion out of people, and I really don't understand why that is.
It's almost like the 270 versus 30-06 debate.
Yeah.
I actually,
people go crazy.
It's kind of a positive. I believe we've evolved as outdoorsmen, and especially hunters and stuff, and more as a gamekeeper, people look forward to spending time on their place and working on it and getting on that tractor than they do actually hunting. And to take away their bush hogging is like a pastime. So I get that, but the point of it is, if you just want to manicure it and make it look great, sure. But we can learn from him, and what's best for your place may not be, Well,
the thing to consider, there's always exceptions. There's always differences from property to property, etc. But in general, and that's a key phrase there, in general, and we've been doing this now easily for 20 years. If you spray your plots in the spring to control incoming warm season weeds, and if you spray your plots in late summer, fall to control incoming cool season weeds, then you find that you don't have to mow your clovers as often to maintain them. And so we generally mow our clovers once a year in August, September. And so our spring herbicide application has taken care of a majority of both broadleaf and grass weeds that we have. Of course, there will be some escapes. There will be some in there that a particular herbicide does not control. Of course, during really wet summers, even though you've applied clethodim or some other grass selective herbicide in spring, you're still going to see more grasses come out of the seed bank. So in a wet year, you might have to spray a grass selective herbicide 2 or 3 times. But in general, with that one single spring herbicide application, and we generally tank mix imazethapyr, generally pursuit, with clethodim, such as clethodim 2EC and a non-ionic surfactant, we're good to go. Let the plots ride through summertime. There will be some broadleafs that I mentioned were either not controlled or they escaped herbicide application, the rain, whatever. Let that structure develop. That little bit of structure is not inhibiting or overly competing with the clover growth. If you have not sprayed at all, then yes, you may have to mow frequently to keep the weeds knocked back. But there's a key phrase. That regular mowing is not getting rid of the weeds.
No.
It's making them shorter. And so they're still there. And the thing that is of interest and that we've learned so much over the past several years about is many of those plants coming in are as or nearly as selected by deer or turkeys and are as or nearly as nutritious as the clovers, selective as the clovers for deer or turkeys, or provide as much nutrition as the clovers do for deer or turkey. So it's kind of like an added bonus. You've got then a broader diversity of plants in the clover food plot. It doesn't have to be solid, pure clover. And
no,
our data from cameras clearly show that we get more visitation and use out of those plots that are unmowed through the summer than mowed plots. If it were different, I would be sitting here saying, guys, you ought to mow your clover plots, 4 or 5 times.
Because it's your job to do that.
Yeah,
That's right.
I don't
Well,
care.
they think
I
it
don't
subconsciously-
care.
This one was best.
I'm telling you,
That's right.
subconsciously, it's like mowing your yard. And you think, oh, I got to keep it neat and clean and edge it, and I want people to drive up and see my house being neat and clean. It's like, it's time to mow my yard again. I love the bush hog. I will tell you from 20 years of trying to grow clover that I personally, just from my own, whatever's anecdotal evidence, I've never been able to develop a healthy, hardy, lasting clover stand by clipping it, ever, never. And the day that I turned to the right herbicides and started spraying and managing to that first and then fertilizing, depending on what was going on, changed my life as far as what my place looked like. Y'all saw that today. We pulled up, it's like a 20-acre field, and that's been 2.5 years or more now that those critters can wake up and there's an abundance of lush food available every single day. It doesn't come and go in a season. It just comes out and comes on. And even in, it's kind of rough looking, but I like the look of it, kind of dirty with a bunch of dead ryegrass and some of these forbs y'all call the names. I didn't know, but actually I like that because there's a super abundance of clover, and not much that's out there is really competing with it right now. And I think they would like it more. I think if poults were there, they might could actually get away from something quicker. I just like the look of it because there's plenty to eat.
A lot of people are keyed on the aesthetic. They like to see clean, green, and even. And if that's what you like, that's fine. You're not a bad person. If you like to see clean, green, and even. What I'm saying is that's not necessary.
Right. Yeah.
And like for the food plot that we looked at today, it had some Johnson grass, it had some Vasey grass, it had some thoroughwort, etc. in it. The only thing you would gain by mowing that right now is that it might look prettier to you because you're not going to control it by mowing it now. It's going to grow right back. And so why not wait until later,
right,
make your mowing time and your herbicide application time and expense more efficient. You mow it once towards late summer. The Vasey grass and the Johnson grass grow back, let it get to the appropriate height. Then you can hit it with your late summer herbicide application that's also going to be good for those incoming cool season weeds. Imazethapyr is soil active. And so by applying that herbicide at that time, it then becomes active in the soil solution. And so then when many of those cool season weeds begin to germinate, they're killed and you don't even see them. And so that's a pre-emergence application over a clover plot that obviously is growing.
Around here, a lot of us use Amazamox.
Right.
And
There's a bunch of different versions.
It's a pretty good one as well that handles some broadleaves and grasses.
Alfalfa, and you can use that over chicory. We use Pursuit over alfalfa, chicory, red clover, of course the white clovers, all cyc. So there's other products. There's some good products out there that helps you maintain your clover fields. The bottom line is you're going to need to visit these sites, at least 2 or 3 times a year to keep them maintained, as opposed to just leaving them totally alone and growing up.
Sure.
It's just making your time and money a little more efficient, choosing how to
do it. The reason that one looked as good as it actually did, and you said Johnson grass and some of this, it actually wasn't to an invasive point where it hindered much growth at all.
Oh, no, right.
That's because we had sprayed it before, like last fall, like exactly what you said we did last fall. And that's why you don't see any more out there than there is. Now, I wish I had not sprayed it quite so early because there was some of that ryegrass. That's my biggest single problem in all our food plots as far as an invasive.
Obviously common, yeah.
Oh,
so a fall application of grass selective herbicide such as clethodim is very
so
good. But not waiting until spring when it's already
headed
flowering
out.
And heading out. Right.
But you wait till the frost when a lot of the good weeds have died back for the year, and then like that ryegrass has jumped a little bit in the fall or later fall. Would that be an appropriate time?
You have an option there according to what's in the field in late summer. If it's things that you're wanting to get rid of, I would go ahead and spray earlier. If it's things that are beneficial and there's not that many of them, that's a relative term, not that many of them according to your own personal weed threshold,
right.
You can wait until later. What you just mentioned is a great strategy for managing early successional communities.
That's what I was thinking.
Like if you have tall fescue, and if you're further north, of course, it's going to be tall fescue and timothy and orchard grass, waiting until after a couple of frosts when the desirable warm season forbs in the field have either gone senescent if they're perennial or if they have died if they're annual. Then you get a selective herbicide application out of a broad spectrum herbicide, glyphosate, 2 quarts per acre, and you're smoking the perennial cool season grasses, getting rid of those, and then next spring you've gotten rid of that carpet and you've freed up the seed bank and you get lots of stuff coming up.
That's interesting, and I hope we hit on that some more later for sure.
Lanny, did you need to go to the restroom?
Yeah, always. Can I stop for a minute? No, I had a question about clover. So the thought, for me historically has been you clip to help control those weeds, but then you clip because this fresh new growth is more attractive. I think maybe this study probably dispels that. And speak to the point of, I think I heard y'all talking about biomass. There's actually more tonnage of food left if you don't clip it. Is that right?
Well, there is a standard agricultural principle, especially in cattle industry, and you're managing hay, you're managing your pastures for livestock. Of course, those are dominated by grasses, almost always, perennial grasses. Well, the oldest part of the plant is at the tip of the leaf. That's the way grasses grow. And so by clipping it, absolutely, you have just removed the oldest portion of the plant, oftentimes the least digestible and unpalatable portion of the plant, to encourage fresh growth that is more highly digestible. It is younger, therefore the plant cell walls haven't thickened, the lignin content is not as great, but deer, with a couple of exceptions, don't eat grass.
Right.
Obviously, the cool season grains, wheat, oats, and rye are exceptions. And in late winter, you get perennial grasses just starting to come up when there's hardly anything else green, especially if you're not managing your property the way you should be. You'll see deer selecting some of those little bitty grass shoots coming up, which at that time are palatable, and the digestibility of them is high. But other than that, deer by and large aren't eating grass. They're concentrating most of their foraging on forbs, select species, if they are available. And you think about how the forbs grow, they come up and you got all these stems, limbs coming off the central portion of the plant, and the leaves are produced out at the ends of the stems all the way through the growing season. And so at any time there are fresh young leaves on many of these forbs as they're growing up. And so by clipping it, you've just removed all of this biomass. So if you clip all of the biomass off of a ragweed plant, for example, that is at the ends of the stems and digestible, that's that tall, you clip it, and then a week later or whatever, you clip the forage that's growing up from the ragweed starting to grow again. The nutritional content and the digestibility of those are going to be the same. Now, if you start pulling and clipping those old leaves on the ragweed plant or on the blackberry or whatever it may be, those are going to be much less digestible, and the nutrients that are available in those are going to be much less. So let's say, for example, you clip the ends of the stems where the young leaves are that have just emerged. Commonly, the crude protein content, for example, will be 25 to 30%, whereas the leaves down here near the bottom, they might be 16 to 18, which still is good. But it's much less. And that's why deer are called concentrate selectors. They're concentrating their foraging on select plants and select plant parts that are most highly digestible.
So we were talking.
Concentrate selectors.
Yeah, we were using grass management for livestock and clover for wildlife, and that's just not the right.
It has been promoted incessantly over the past 30 years. And let's say, for example, you have alfalfa or red clover. Now, there's two perennial forages. They grow a true stem, and they can get quite lignous, especially alfalfa, almost a woody type stem, But think about it. Are deer eating the alfalfa stems that are so large? Well, no. And so they're eating the leaves out at the tips of the alfalfa plant. Ditto with red clover. And so if that's what you're sampling and sending to the lab, the nutritional value of that is the same as if you had mowed the plot and then it's growing back. And so again, your biomass, when you mow your plots, what you're doing is lowering the biomass of the forage that's available. And I am not talking about total biomass, and which is commonly done in agronomy. They will, throw a frame out there and they'll clip the whole plants off, like an inch tall or whatever, send all that to the oven, dry it, and then send it to the lab for nutritional analysis. Guess what? That's going to be of much lower quality than if you're a deer manager and you're just clipping off the portions of the plant that the deer eat. It's a huge difference in the quality of the plant, quality of the forage sample. And so even if you're clipping the leaves that the deer are eating, you still have a greater biomass than if you clip the same leaves after you have mowed and let it go for a week. So we've got graphs where we show the biomass of unmowed clover plots, and then we're mowing at 4-week intervals, just to pick an interval.
Right.
That's what you read in, whatever online. And so, here we go. We're mowing it week 1, week 2, week 3. Well, the mowed sections never catch up in biomass to the unmowed sections. And in the unmowed sections, the biomass is only represented by the leaves that the deer eat, not the whole plant or the stems.
Makes sense.
If you've got, I guess if you have too much forage, you might, we talked about maybe clipping it. If it's all about the bolt, it's like, 70% of it's already made flour and whatever. And you want to, maybe that'll extend it a little bit longer before it goes dormant. But if, like today, we looked at that, and there's no issue there. There's no need to clip anything. The deer are clipping it, and it was like a 20-acre field, and they are mauling it. So you don't need anything to stimulate more growth or to clip anything.
And even with something like chicory that truly does bolt, got a big old stem and got the little purple flowers coming up, the deer and the turkeys are eating the leaves off of that bolt all the way up, eating the flowers.
We saw that today.
Eating the bolt going down. I mean, and it's still highly digestible, highly nutritious. We just have this perception.
Well, the blooms are attracting insects too, which we want out in the field. So
Obviously important for turkeys.
Well, we also mentioned today too that I think, people will listen to his advice more now when diesel is $5 and $6 a gallon.
That's a motivator.
Because that's a big cost savings.
Sure. So Craig, I usually have a good idea of an answer to a question before I ask it, or at least I try to, but I don't have a clue on this one. I'm just going to ask you. How do you feel about clover?
I love clover. We plant clover. When I say we, that's my graduate students and technicians, and we plant clovers every year. Or manage them, yeah.
So if a guy's got a property, clover it needs to, in your opinion, make up a portion of those hunting plots as a management tool?
I don't think they have to. I think that is a great option if you want to. For hunting plots for deer, of course, there are annual and perennial options that are outstanding. And to really provide nutrition for deer during the time of year that is most critical, and that would be April through June. By early July, approximately 50% of the antler production is done, and this is the critical period.
Sure.
Your perennial forages that are greening up in late winter, early spring, and they are really pumping out the volume in that April to June time period, and so that is a great addition, and I'm going to call it supplement, hopefully, to your other habitat management practices where you're providing high-quality forage in your woods and in your fields as well.
Yeah. And so not only for those bucks with velvet antlers, but the pregnant does. We just see it being so important to that deer herd.
Certainly can affect her milk production. The quality of her milk will remain the same, but the amount of milk that she produced is what is the limiting factor there.
That's interesting. It's starting. I'm sure you guys are as well. I'm seeing does that look like they're about ready to pop on cameras. So we're
30 days.
Yeah, something like that away. So it's going to get them. They're going to be even more ready to pop.
And obviously that's later down here than it is a little farther north when most of the phones have already hit the ground. But
Yeah, we're seeing pictures on Instagram. People seeing fawns.
So the point is, adjust to where you are in your timing and the timing of the rut, timing of parturition, and nutrient availability.
Until I really started paying attention to these pregnant does, watching them on cameras in the last few years, it must be so stressful on them to have that baby, because you see them go from these big fat to you just start seeing all their ribs.
You can see their ribs. That's right.
They're such a precious thing. So, plenty to eat. Think about that, and to feed another mouth, and then
or two.
The heat, or 2 or 3 in some cases, but 2. Let's just say 2 if they're real healthy. And then this heat like we have now, and all these like horse flies.
Oh man!
And I mean, they're just covering them up and stuff. And on top of that, bobcats, coyotes, stuff trying to catch and kill your little fawn. I mean, it's amazing. I know deer are much more resilient than a poor little, poult and whatever, turkeys that we talk about a lot. But it's still, that life is so precious.
Yeah, yeah, it really is.
So we've pretty much nailed down the whole clover thing.
We might make one more point.
All right, let's keep making points here.
The mowing thing.
Okay,
we're talking about perennial forages. Now, for your annual forages, there shouldn't be any mowing, because your annual forages such as crimson, berseem, balanza, arrowleaf clovers, you're largely planting those in late summer, early fall. And they're greening up out of the gate and providing green forage through the winter, but then they're dying the following April, May, June, early July, according to which clovers you planted. And so at no time during that cycle would you be mowing them. But if you're maintaining annual clovers, which is a great food source and can be used in many different situations, then you can spray those plots after the clovers die. If you've waited, 2 or 3 weeks or however the plant response is, fields filling up with weeds according to what they are, according to your objectives, which, by the way, could be outstanding brooding patches at that time. So then you can spray those plots just with a glyphosate application, wait 3 to 4 weeks, and by August, September, mowing that dead vegetation, and your crimson and arrowleaf clovers will reseed naturally, and you can no-till topsoe a few others if you want, or drill in some wheat or oats. So a lot of people confuse the perennial clover management with the annual clover management. Right. Just thought that might be worth mentioning.
So I would throw in, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you would still have a hole in or a chink in your armor if you relied on those exclusively. You've got a window from whatever May, early June through into the summer that you've got to fill, and that's in the clover world. That's only with a white or these ladanos we have.
When you're up in Tennessee and north of there in particular, our perennial forages are like this in mid-December through early March.
Lip high, as Bobby would say.
Yeah, they've gone into their winter dormancy, and so you're relying on annual forages to help you out in your food plots at that time. But exactly, I like to show a chart that shows the forage availability of the annual cool seasons, and when they die, the perennial cool seasons are busting out of the gate, and then when they're beginning to go down in summer dormancy, then your annual warm seasons are really productive. Your soybeans or cowpeas or joint vetch or what have you.
Right.
Got to have a plan. So can you speak to these forbs that you refer to, these beneficials? I think ragweed might be one of them. Can you give some examples of some beneficials that you like seeing?
Oh, yeah. Lamb's quarters, obviously we mentioned ragweed and partridge pea, Carolina geranium, daisy fleabane, old field aster, bushy aster, pokeweed. I mean, there's lots of them. And even not in a food plot necessarily, but like in early successional areas, some blackberry, dewberry. I don't want a food plot to be taken over by any of those plants, because then it's not a food plot anymore. It's an early successional area, and I would be managing that differently. Likewise, in an early successional area, I wouldn't want any one of those to take over the whole field. I would want a greater variety of plants that are available, that are coming in and out at different times, providing deer, turkeys, songbirds, whatever the case may be, a little something different during the year. But there's a wide suite of those species that are available. And they're all sitting there, well, I shouldn't say that. they are sitting there free for the taking in the seed bank, but everybody's seed bank is different. And realizing that and seeing what your seed bank contains, that's kind of like opening Christmas presents. You never know what's going to be in there. And so you open a box, a lot of times, I'd rather not have this, but this one is great. And so if you don't like it, kill it. If you do like it, great.
Keep it.
Yeah.
Is there a significant difference between the nutritional value of annual and perennial clovers, or is it just a timing thing?
If you during their period of before the annual clovers go to flower, their nutritional value is going to be pretty consistent with that of the perennial forages.
Gotcha.
And you're typically looking anywhere from crude protein values of like 23 to 30, 33 maybe, somewhere in there. You got calcium levels that are easily 1 to 3%, when the maximum amount by deer is 0.5%. You've got phosphorus levels that are 0.3 to 0.5%. The most a growing buck is going to use is 0.1%. And that's ditto with these naturally occurring forbs also. The crude protein, calcium, phosphorus, potassium values, they are way in excess of what a deer needs for maximum growth.
Sounds like we need to throw those mineral licks away and plant more clover.
I still like to get pictures over my licks.
Yeah, that's a great way to get the pictures, but you're right.
Salt.
The clover, Lanny.
I do too, but deer like the taste of salt, just like I was mentioning. If Toxie was walk out there and bring in a watermelon and bust it open, first thing I do, where's the
Where's
salt?
the salt?
Because
That's
I think it
right.
tastes good.
right.
And deer do the same, but you're not likely to see any effect in terms of antler growth, fawn survival, weights per sex or age class, or any of that with mineral licks.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so I keep going back to these and thinking about these native forbs that are there in the seed bank. And so they're there for the taking for the most part. So some properties might have more of one than another. Like
Definitely.
and so a guy can learn how to manipulate his soil to encourage those plants.
Yeah, tell him you sobered this morning. He mentioned, I asked him, how long can some of this stuff be dormant in the soil and then wake up?
Dormant, or what we'd call hard seed.
Yeah, or you can bring one to life. Yeah, however long that is.
Easily, many of these plants, the seed may be sitting there in the seed bank for 25, 100 plus years. I mean, we really don't know. And of course, there's a difference between different species,
Right.
but the longevity of many of these seed to remain viable in the seed bank is astounding.
That's crazy, isn't it?
You think about
It's
if
amazing.
you go in and clear a section of woods that might be 100, 150 years old, what's going to pop up immediately? You got all of these annual and perennial grasses and forbs coming
Right.
up. Well, where did they come from? Some of them came
May
from
have
birds.
blown in or
No-
something.
No doubt some of them came from birds, but many of them came from the dormant seed and dormant rhizomes that are present in the ground, just waiting for that chance again with adequate sunshine and temperature, available sunlight, lack of competition, and also for the leaf litter not to be this deep and smothering everything.
Right,
but when
right.
that is removed, here they come.
One I've always seen that I've just taken a mental note of is like when a big old hardwood tree falls over and then you've got that big pile of dirt and root, you almost always see a bunch of pokeweed pop
Yeah.
up on
Oh, yeah.
those.
Oh, yeah.
And it just makes you wonder how old was that? How long was that seed sitting there? It's
And like
it's
I
very
say, some of
interesting
that
to
might have
think
come
about.
from birds, sitting
Sure.
in the trees and dropping the seed. But a lot of those things have been laying there for decades.
I think every time we do this podcast, one of us looks at the other one and says, nature is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Nature is amazing.
And
Go
nature.
nature.
We were reminded today, the clover plots are beginning to stress a little bit with this intense heat. But when you go to places where the soil has been disturbed and you've got all these naturally occurring plants, they weren't wilting down.
No, they were jamming.
They were looking perfectly happy because they're adapted to these conditions, these soils, these temperatures, this climate. Some of those don't even have their most vigorous growth until temperatures are in the upper 80s, for example. And so they're still trucking along. You still got those young leaves out there at the ends of the twigs. So in the driest times of the summer, you still can have plants that are providing optimal nutrition for deer.
So let's go back to this clover that y'all looked at that's beginning in the last couple of weeks to show signs that we hadn't had much rain and it's 95 degrees out here.
Honestly, I was tickled to death. It looked as good as it even did, given that we hadn't had any rain in so long and it's so hot.
Ground is cracked wide open.
Yeah.
Ground's cracked wide open.
Well,
still.
my question is, somebody that's just hard, got their mind made up that they want to mow their clover, now would not be the time to do it, would it? That would be stressful in and of itself on the plant.
Kill it, probably.
Well, think about this.
That's what I'm asking.
If it was stressed enough that it's wilted down on the ground, you're not mowing it.
Yeah.
You're just driving over with a tractor.
That's right.
You're scalping the surface to be able to mow it.
And so you're knocking weeds down that might be growing out there. And that is fine. But my point, again, is you're not gaining anything by mowing at that time than if you were to wait a little while, let the wildlife use whatever cover structure is out there, perhaps eat many of those plants that are available. And then, see, the majority of those plants, they're not going to flower and begin to, think about seeding until late summer, early fall. And so your annual mowing in August, September, for example, is clipping those off before they go to flower and seed, so they're not adding to the seed bank to build up more and more.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Dudley, you got a question for him?
I've got a million, and we talked about it a lot.
How many podcasts we doing?
We talked about it a lot this morning, but so we know how important clover is in general and food plots. But just say a landowner has a lot of ground that's open. I think I know what the answer is, but you wouldn't say to plant clover in every opening. Wouldn't you want to have some other type? This new diversity word that's been around forever. We're starting to realize how important that is. So, just on an ideal scenario, and you did have a big field, how much of it would be clover, and what would you do with the rest of it?
Well, what I begin to do first off is for a property is look at the aerial photo. Let's see what we have. And then I'm evaluating what are the objectives of the landowner.
Sure.
And what are the limitations? Let's just say, because this is true with the vast majority of people in the eastern United States who are managing their property for wildlife, it's for deer and turkeys. And so I want to see good fawning cover distributed around, which also is going to provide either good brooding cover or good nesting cover, which isn't necessarily the same. That's not to say a turkey wouldn't nest in a field of annual grasses and forbs, because they do. But I would rather have more structure out there, more overhead plant cover to help her hide her nest and hide herself than some other situations. I would want more annual plants to provide, in general, better brooding cover and better foraging for deer. The annual forbs, on average, this is not true for all of them, are more selected and have greater nutritional content than the perennial plants. Of course, there are exceptions, such as the desmodiums, pokeweed, etc. There's several perennial plants that are very good. Old field aster comes to it.
Right. Desmodium's that plant with the triangular thing that
Bagger
sticks to
slice,
you.
what we call it. Right.
Right.
And so, all early succession is not the same. And we broke this down earlier where we talked about if you disc a field, the majority of the plants coming up usually are going to be annual forbs and grasses. And after a year, and especially two, That's going to change over, and you're going to see a predominance of more perennial plants, both grasses and forbs coming in, and a lot of times, especially by that third year, some brambles. And according to the site, by the third or fourth year, could happen on the first, but in general, by the third or fourth year, you're going to see a lot of woody stuff coming in.
So baby trees.
Right. And so you just saw 3 changes in the plant community, from an annual dominated plant community to a perennial dominated plant community to a woody dominated plant community. That is ecological succession. That is the successional process. And we try to break this down. Ecological succession is a very complex subject.
For sure.
But to break it down, to hopefully help people understand it, in the most easily explained process, we would call the annual forbs and grasses the first successional stage. And then when that plant community changes over to become dominated by perennials, we call that the second successional stage. And then once woody plants begin to dominate it, we call that the third successional stage. And we talked about and pointed out how the first woody plants, whether it's eastern red cedar, Virginia pine, winged elm, sweet gum, green ash, so many of these that, are brought in by wind and brought in very quickly by birds, etc., they are relatively, most of them, short-lived. And so they might not be on the site for 50 to 60, 70 years. And then that forest, and that is a forest that has established through succession, it will change over into a different suite of tree species, most oftentimes oaks, hickories, maples, etc. Then that's the fourth successional stage. And on some sites in the country, you can have American beech, sugar maple, hemlock, white pine, etc. Those species that can grow in shade, if there's no disturbance, and it might take 100, 300 years for that fourth successional stage to finally turn into a different forest type, well, there's 5 possible successional stages. Right. And so early to late. This was early, this is late, and I won't hold my middle finger up at you, but there's middle. And so as you go from that early into that mid with some woody stuff coming in, that's when a lot of magic happens.
Right.
That's when some of the best deer cover you're finding, especially for fawns. That's really good turkey nesting cover. Right. Not usually so good for brooding. Right. And the forage value is still there, but it's not as good as it was in general back there in that first successional stage. So thinking about distributing these different types of successional stages around on your property.
Right. Is it generally speaking 1 to 5 years, 1 to 3 years? That those first stages when it starts to become woody,
yes,
like we looked at today. Would you say?
All right. Now, if you're on a bottomland site and there's a creek flowing beside the field, and along that creek there's sycamore and green ash and sweet gum, you're going to have to do something to maintain that field in early succession pretty much every year.
Wow.
Because those trees are just raining the seed down.
And it's better soil. It's going to grow
especially if it floods too, I'm sure.
Right. And you can oftentimes see trees growing 6 to 12 feet tall in 1 year.
Oh, easy around here.
On some of those
we
sites.
hadn't had that much. But I was just thinking about rotating if you had enough early successional patches. Let's call them that.
Yeah.
It's like a food patch or whatever, or
like a quilt.
A tree patch. I mean, it's that important. We should have a patch for it. So if you had enough to say a third, and you were going to keep some, or maybe you lean towards the year one to grow the annuals. But I'm just saying, if you could rotate those every 3 years, kind of start over, then you would keep them all within that early successional.
And what you've just described is, for example, you got a big field and you are disking or burning or spot spray. Well, hopefully you're doing a little spot spraying on all of them each year, because there's always going to be some plants in there you don't want. Some kind of disturbance on a third of it each year. That way you've got, a 1 year community, what's called a 1 year rough, a 2 year rough, a 3 year rough, that kind of thing.
Exactly what I was thinking about.
But also think about the topography and the aspect when you're planning your habitat management and where you're going to have these different successional stages. I'm not going to try to put my early succession usually in the bottoms unless, for example, I'm going to disc it like every year, every other year. I'm going to have those more on the uplands, and those bottomlands, especially if manpower is limited, et cetera, that's ecologically predisposed to be forest. It wants to be forest. And historically, that's not ecologically disposed to be burned frequently. But those sites that are more exposed on a southern or a western aspect, you can burn those very frequently, very easily, because they're driest, and those are the ones, of course, that burn most often historically.
Yeah, that would be a lot of work to keep some bottom ground in early successional with all the stuff, winged seeds flying in all the time, and it's such a productive soil.
An exception, and that's not to say that can't be done. An exception is, let's say, for example, you have a great crop of ragweed and or partridge pea in a bottomland field. That is stimulated perfectly well by disking every year from November to February.
We have lots of giant ragweed in our bottom.
You can have keep that trucking year after year.
Or you've got the person that's all, they may own 800 acres in the Mississippi Delta.
That's right.
And so they want to have different stages.
But that, if you have that much, a lot of that, if it's all open ground, a lot of that's going to be a long way from the tree line.
Sure.
And so over here, you're not going to have the problem with the trees that you do next to the tree line. And that's another thing that I try to get people to think about. If they're managing a given field for early succession and you've got some problems with woody species coming in, kill the mama trees. All those problematic species, go into your woods 50 to 100 yards all the way around it, and girdle and spray to kill the mama trees that are throwing all those seed in there, and leave the desirable trees that you're not fighting in the field every year. That takes a little work. It's not that bad. It's actually enjoyable if you get into it. But that will save you a lot of pain, effort, toil, and trouble down the road.
Gotcha.
So I've got, he's never going to get to the next question because we keep asking.
So we got to do 5 podcasts.
Assume you have a track and it's 100% timber. The only way you'll ever start this process is to cut some trees.
That's correct.
There's no other way to do it. You've got to start cutting some timber. Just occurred to me, and quite honestly, if you're smart and doing the best thing for your wildlife, you'll do that in a very diversified manner also.
Right. And so think about this. That's like a beautiful blank canvas, and you look at the photo of the property, you overlay the topo, you overlay and you kind of blend that in so you can see the photo with the topo blended in, and then you overlay the soils map, and you add in your roads and trails. Now all of a sudden you are placing the different vegetation types or successional stages. It's all forest right now, but you're deciding, okay, where am I going to have areas that I'm going to maintain as thick bedding cover for deer? Where are the areas that I'm going to try to burn or disc on a relatively frequent basis to have the best areas for natural foraging for deer, or nesting cover, or brooding cover for turkeys, et cetera? And let me also say, before we go too far down this road, I don't want to give the picture that you have to have early successional vegetation to have good forage or fawning cover or nesting cover for turkeys. Turkeys are perfectly happy to nest in the woods. The trick is your management. Are you managing the woods to provide nesting cover in the woods?
Right.
Most times that's not happening, and so the turkeys are nesting there with relatively little vegetation cover. And when they have better cover available in the understory, that's when you can see better nesting success. So the structure could be in the woods or in an open area.
It goes back to a recent study that you've done that was showing that there was less than 5% of this ideal successional habitat, if I'm saying that right, that the turkeys desired to nest in. There's very little. The point being, there's very little of that
available.
Yeah, we're still in this project. This is the 6th year we've put transmitters on. I don't know, it's almost 650 turkeys or 650 hens, and not counting the gobblers. And I think we've monitored 578 nests, and in 5 counties in South Middle Tennessee, and that's the area that has had the greatest decline in harvest over the last 10 years or so. There's 3 counties down on the bottom end of that that's really seen a significant decline. The 2 counties adjacent on the north end of the 5, they have seen no decline or perhaps even a slight amount of increase. And so we have 10 study sites in those 5 counties, 2 counties of which have not seen a decline, 3 counties that have. And so it's been very interesting to see what the productivity has been. And so in those counties, anywhere from 3 to 4% is in either early succession or shrubland. However, the turkeys, the hens, are seeking out those areas, and even though early succession might represent 3% of what's available to them, about 25, almost 30% of the nests are in those areas. Now, we have a relatively high success rate, nest success rate in those areas. It's on average around 30-some%, which is decent. But that doesn't mean that's better than what's in the woods. Regardless of where the nest is, what at least our data have shown is helping influence the success is the cover that is available around the nest, where the hen is choosing to nest, and whether it's in the woods or in early successional areas. If there is sufficient vegetation, especially over the nest, around the nest, we're seeing, I think it was like a 2% increase in daily nest survival, which, over time can be
That
very
adds
good.
up.
That's a lot. Yeah.
2% a day.
2% daily,
That's
2% increase in daily nest survival.
Compounded daily.
Yeah. So, guys, did we finish that about the blank canvas? I think there was a little bit more that you wanted to add. And I think you were going toward about thinking about the huntability of the property, if I remember right.
Absolutely. Normally, when somebody has a management plan developed for their property, they get something that tells them, okay, here's an inventory of your woods, hopefully an evaluation of your woods for whatever your stated objectives are. Here's the state condition of your fields and how you might treat them, and you might plant these things here in your food plots. It's like a general canned recommendation. Very seldomly do I see a management plan that is actually written for the huntability of the property, while also, and I'm going to say maximizing either the nutritional value and the cover value of that property for whichever species you're managing for. And I know everybody, in general is interested in deer and turkeys, but which is number one? One has to be a little over the other.
Right.
And so turkey management helps deer. Deer management in general helps turkeys, but there are differences. There are differences in timing. There are differences in the exact structure of cover that you would want, etc. And so articulating your objectives is very important, whether that's for turkey hunting, for deer hunting, and yes, a combination of both. And so you look at that photo, you look at the topographic map on top of your property photo, the soils, your roads and trails, and all of a sudden you begin to see, okay, ecology, the topography, the biology of the species is beginning to show me where to place these things, and I'm meshing this with my access, the predominant wind directions. I'm also going to set up some places for wind directions that are unusual, and there's almost always going to be some areas of the property I don't have access there. And so I find that very important to work on providing yourself access to all portions of the property, working off of that. And, for example, with deer, there's not many people that concentrate on, okay, I'm going to set up a deer bedding block, holding cover for deer right here, and I'm going to maintain it as that cover. Just like you would set up, okay, this field is going to be a food plot. I like to do the same thing with deer, so I know at any given time this is where the deer are bedded on this property, at least the majority of them. And we know that because of cameras that we put in there. Before and then after we create these bedding blocks, it's astonishing at how much use these things get. The deer get in there, and then you'll just see them on camera. They're just standing there. like for 2 hours, and their ears are twitching this way, looking around, and then they'll lay down, and then they'll get up, and I mean they're just literally hanging out there,
But
like
they feel so safe right there.
From 2 to 5 o'clock. They're just there.
Yep.
And is that not powerful?
Yeah.
It's very.
Know I know where my deer are. Instead of wondering, I think they bed over yonder somewhere, or oftentimes off of the property on the neighbor. So thinking about setting up cover that holds your deer and how do you manage and maintain that cover is very important. And then you're meshing in your food plots, perhaps according to your soils, especially for your big food plots, because we can grow a relatively small hunting plot on very poor quality soil. You know, we add lime, appropriate fertilizer, et cetera, we can get something to grow. But on those big ones, that's cutting down on the amendments and the money that you have to put into it. That's where it's kind of important to at least consider the soils for the productivity to cut down on the amendments that you have to add. So it's like a puzzle that you're putting together, but you're using nature to help you put together the puzzle.
Yeah, it seems a lot easier to make the habitat, or make the food, or whatever you want to call it, but putting it in the right place to improve your hunting success is 100-fold more difficult to process
Absolutely.
in the normal human brain.
Yep.
And there's so many things you have to take into account.
I've got a slide that I show in various presentations. I can tell you the nutritional carrying capacity of this. I can tell you the nutritional value of that. I can tell you how to kill this, what to spray there, when, how much to do. That's science, okay? We know that. But how do you place these things, arrange these things on your property to facilitate and maximize in your hunting? That's art. And not to be cheesy, but, all of y'all are artists, and I'm sure you can probably draw better than me. But think about your property as a canvas and how you put these things together.
Yes.
Think about your access. Think about getting into the stand and out of the stand, where you could wear a blue leisure suit and Old Spice.
Wash your mouth
I know
out.
you
Wash
never
your
would.
mouth
I figured I'd get a reaction.
Oh, man.
But think about it. If you have it set up to where the wind direction is correct,
Now you're
then your
talking.
scent is not as critical as it is if you're trying to force yourself into an area and it's blowing from the bedding area into where you're
I
sitting.
want up your blues leisure suit. If you could set it up to where you could get in your, let's call them shooting houses, whatever you're getting into, theoretically you could get into it without it, and the field's got deer in it already, and they'll never know you were there.
Exactly.
That would be, if you can try to,
because you got to get
emulate
out.
that.
you got to do some work for that.
Yeah,
Yes.
and getting out is just as important. or
Think
maybe
about
more.
where 99.9% of the shooting houses are, on the edge of the field.
Of course.
And so what if those shooting houses are backed up 40, 50 yards in the woods? You cut some trees in the front to get all that bushed up. You don't access the shooting house from the edge of the field. You access it from a trail from behind. You can't see the food plot when you're climbing up. You can't see the food plot until you just get up into the stand, and then you're coming up over that cover, and there it all is. And you don't have to shoot every square inch of the field. If you take out a tree here, a tree there, whatever, you've got various shooting lanes to get out there. Obviously, I'm talking about rifle hunting.
Sure.
That's decreasing your hunting pressure without deer knowing that you're there. That is increasing your daily observations, because the deer are using those areas more in the daytime. It's huge.
Yeah.
And there's some places, you've already mentioned this, but it just doesn't work well. And that may as well be like bedding cover, that you're going to skirt, maybe in the right wind or whatever. But I've got a scenario at my family farm that's perfect, and it needs a little bit of work, but it works great in the afternoon. You're overlooking a field, and there is a creek right before you get to the shooting house, and the position of the shooting house is to where that creek has flown. It's hard to explain on a mic. But the thermals from the creek in the afternoon, where the water is flowing downstream, is
Washing that
sucking.
scent down.
Yeah, it's at my back, and it's sucking all of my scent out from behind me and out to an area that is not good bedding cover that the deer never come from. And they come from the far corner of the field where it's thick, and it's it's almost impossible for them to smell me. You know, and around here
That's saying a
on a
lot.
warmish afternoon in the south when there's not a lot of wind and the thermals just kind of take over. But that's the kind of stuff that we like to lay in bed and obsess about, and placement to make huntability better.
Toss this one out there for free, a little tidbit when somebody's setting up a property. Makes a huge difference. You've got your property roads. Where does everybody put their food plots?
On the road.
That's right. Instead of having like a little spur road to get to the food plot that is at least 50, and I'm going to say 100 yards from the main road, you sit overlooking those fields, and you're watching deer feed, and somebody comes on the ATV on the main property trail, those deer are going to be feeding. They're going to lift their head up, and they're going to follow the sound, and they're going to put their head right back down. On those fields that are right next to the road, they're gone before the ATV ever gets there, or as soon as it does. That is hunting pressure. And it's ironic. Okay, I hunted this stand yesterday, so I won't hunt it today. I'll let it rest for a few days. But you're driving by it twice to get to the stand down the road. You know, that is hunting pressure, right? Your presence is the hunting pressure.
Sure. You know, and I think it's like some smaller properties. It seems like oftentimes we end up talking about larger canvases, but smaller properties might only be one of the things that you're describing. It might only be bedding area. I guess I'm asking a question is when you look at that map, and if you had a 50-acre property that you know, your grandmother's property, the best use of that might be to create bedding area.
I think of some properties in the Midwest that has all the food and the best quality food a deer could ever eat all around it, but somebody's just bought 25 acres. You're special right there in southeast Iowa. You know what I'm saying? And you got, or northern Missouri or central, wherever the case may be, you got all this food and whatnot around you, big properties, but you just happen to get the 25 acres or 50 acres that's in a special place. I'm not worried about food plots in that situation.
No.
I'm worried about developing thick cover that's going to hold deer, because as soon as those crops are harvested, where are they going to go? They're
Let's
going
face
to,
it, what's your best probability of having a mature buck on his feet during daylight? It is not out where the food is. That's a very low probability. By far, it'd be what he's talking about.
Yeah. So look, I think Lanny needs. He's got Zumba class.
Yeah. Got to
So
calisthenics.
if you, we'll let Lanny go ahead and leave if you need to. But
You've got mail.
Got to get out of here.
So but it is interesting to. I hear a lot of people say, well, you know, I can't do all that on my property. I don't have. My property isn't set up like that, and
Some may only have one spot where you can have a food plot. And
Yeah.
it may not necessarily be the most ideal.
Well, that's why I brought up a minute ago. You can cut trees anywhere there's a tree just about.
Yep.
And let nature do it for you. So, I mean, there's usually a way in some form. Now, you might not can go in and create it by your own hand and till it and bush hog it and so forth, but, you know, typically, you know, there's a way to create it at a minimum, you know, make the place into a great bedding area.
Yeah. Well, and with a lot of this mulching equipment, a guy for 4 or 5 hours can open up an area pretty easily with some of this stuff. So, well, this whole thing has been fascinating, guys.
Yes.
I know we've enjoyed it, and there's been a lot going on today. Dr. Harper, we appreciate you being here and
thoroughly enjoy spending time with y'all. It's a fun group.
Yeah, well, we've enjoyed
Very
you
easy
and
to talk to.
So look, we always have our guest answer a trivia question. And then you'll be answering, if you get this question correct, we have a listener that has given us a review, will win a prize.
If I get it wrong, will he win two?
If you get it wrong, we'll give him your phone number. And then but we've never had a guest miss the question, so that in and of itself puts
Bobby,
a little pressure.
that's so much pressure. I can't believe you did that to him.
So Mac, help us with this. Mac, who is he playing for?
So, Dr. Harper, you were playing for Dave View, DAVJAU.
Has anybody noticed our listeners have some odd little names when they leave these reviews?
It's. I'm glad we have a more proper name this week.
Yes, and
some
so-
of them have been a little borderline.
The prize today will be a Chapin Gamekeeper Edition backpack sprayer.
Oh yeah.
Dave, brother, I'll try my best. But
So Dave left a review.
Those are
Thank
awesome.
you. And what does this review say?
Great podcast. I'm a primary care physician and came down with COVID. During my quarantine, I caught up on a lot of housework and the podcast. Great therapy. I will now try to prescribe the podcast series, and that's where that's all I got.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Great
thank you, Dave.
review.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. So, all right. So.
That's all I got.
Yeah. So.
But okay, the question is, these are all names for something. What is that something? Turquoise elf cup, hairy parachute, cinnamon jelly baby, weeping tooth crust, witch's butter, elbow patch crust, hairy nuts disco, King Alfred's cakes are all names of what?
Well, okay. So there's one more we could have put in there.
But it would have been a dead giveaway.
Well, yeah. So we held one out, but
Why?
Well,
it sounded like some kind of cakes or desserts to me, but I'm telling you right up, that's a sheer guess. I guess I'm the only one that missed the question.
well, no. Let's not give up on you just yet. Let's tell him that last one.
It grows in the woods.
Mushrooms.
Yeah.
he got it.
Yeah. Those are
What
names of
did I
mushrooms.
say it was yesterday when you asked me? I can't remember.
Daylilies.
Daylilies
Yeah.
was my guess.
I was thinking it was some. That's the most number of casual names for a plant species I've ever heard in my life. I'm thinking of some kind of natural forb or something that grows
But
in the
the
woods.
dead giveaway at the very end was chicken of the woods, and I was like,
Oh,
we
yeah.
got to take that away.
Well,
That
I mean, I know several plants, and none of those were plants. I thought, well, it's not plants.
common names
And,
for
and
some.
I don't eat that many desserts, and I certainly don't eat, the processed stuff out of the little stores. But I thought maybe there's some kind of cakes or something that you can buy. It's got those weird names, but I don't know. I'm not a huge mushroom guy, but a couple of those. Okay, I think I can get this because these are not plants.
Yeah, they were pretty bizarre, but
I was listening so hard, I had no clue. I was sitting here with him, I had no clue.
so Dave, get in touch with us, and we'll get that backpack sprayer to you. So that's a great one. You've got a backpack sprayer in your truck. I saw it this morning.
We use those a lot.
Yeah.
Lots of applications.
So look, you've driven here from you live just south of Knoxville. Obviously, you said something about Go Vols or something like that. So, have you ever been around Peyton Manning?
I have not.
They tell us he's a big that he likes to duck hunt, isn't it?
I think he does.
Yeah. So that's kind of my. All right, my whole knowledge of Vol football is right
That's
there.
right.
So
that and you listened to a Kenny Chesney song once.
yeah. Well, I'm talk radio,
Maynard.
so I don't. So, is there anything else before we wrap this thing up that to put a bow around that? Is there anything we forgot that we didn't mention about clover maintenance or?
Or something we just like the general public to know about,
Number one, we mow our perennial forage plots. A lot of people say, "Oh, he said never to mow my plots." No, that's not what we said. We're saying that with proper management, let's say management that includes some herbicide applications, you don't have to mow it as often. So don't leave with the wrong message.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the people of Tennessee are lucky to have him as their extension guy because
no question.
I get the impression you're a guy that goes and does and it doesn't sit behind a desk. It's you're out there showing people how to do this, and I think that's a big difference in some others.
Well, lots of property visits, lots of visits with the extension agents who do superb job in the state as they do in other states. It's a shame that more people are not aware of their extension office and what they can get through extension, so they should take advantage of that.
There's your Gamekeeper tip of the week right there. Right there.
So is that different than the NRCS office?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, the extension offices, it's called cooperative extension. It's called cooperative because it's the federal government, the state government, and the county government all cooperating in terms of funding these positions through the land grant university of the state. And so there are extension agents. Some states have an extension office in every county. Some, have an office that covers multiple counties, but there are extension agents throughout the state. And then at the land grant university, there are extension specialists who specialize in particular topics, issues. And then if the agents, when they meet with their county clientele, they have questions, need more information, then they have a specialist to draw on for additional information.
Sure. So like you can call the Clay County office here and ask a random question, and they're not always going to know the answer to that, but they just call somebody else in extension and
if it is
and
related to
branch out.
wildlife, they have an outstanding extension wildlife specialist in Dr. Bronson Strickland.
That's correct.
Sure do.
He does a great job.
So,
There we go.
if you've got a herbicide question or not sure what's going on with your tomatoes or how to do something in your garden, identifying an insect, contact your county extension agent.
Well, yeah, that's some good stuff. Well, look, we really appreciate you being here. I want to say that I know your family's going through a tough time right now. We'll be saying a prayer for you, safe travel back home, and
I appreciate
you're going to
that
have some tough days ahead, but we'll be thinking about you, and we'll say a prayer for you.
Thank you.
And before we close this thing out, Toxie, I want to call a little recognition. Mr. Bill Sugg, a couple of weeks ago, got inducted into the Mississippi Outdoorsman Hall of Fame, if I'm
He did.
saying
Yeah.
that right.
Most
So-
deserving too.
yeah, so I've had that written down a couple of times to mention, and it keeps getting pushed to the
Shout
side.
out to Uncle Willie.
Yeah, were you able to go to that?
No, he wasn't able to go.
Is that right?
Yeah, he had to miss it. Sure did. Cuz went on his behalf
Well,
because he and Cuz and I had been the first year they had it. Were inducted into that.
I read a couple of local newspaper
It's
write-ups
pretty cool.
on it. It's
It's-
really neat, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure who does all the nominating, but they
They have a
dig deep
board.
and
Yeah,
do
it's in Leland, Mississippi now.
So
So they've
the-
got a
the-
big building in downtown. They devoted to that, and they spent some money. They've got, in 7 figures of money from the state to help fund everything and get it like it needed to be. It's pretty cool what they put together there.
yeah, it is. I'm gonna say this: years ago, Bill Sugg was the first employee of Monsioka, if I'm getting that right.
That's great.
I don't think you could have picked a better person. He is such.
I mean, I didn't pick him. I think God picked him. Things just happen sometimes.
It does.
It was definitely destiny.
Congrats to Bill.
Yeah, that's right.
also, the woman that taught my dad and granddad how to turkey hunt was also. She also won the Hall of Fame.
How
Her
cool
name
is
was
that?
Eleanor Ressler.
Special
lady.
I've looked at every year. It's only been a couple of years now, but they'll induct people that are well known, but they're doing a really good job of finding people like that. They're so deserving. It's like I say all the time. I doubt we've ever had an article written or a TV show about the greatest hunters that there are. People look up to some of these people as heroes, but the best ones probably you never even hear about.
That's right.
And so our state did a really good job in finding some of these outdoor should be accomplishments and heroes that aren't on the radar screen but are truly authentic, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It sure is. So, congrats to Mr. Bill Sugg. And let's look. We've been here a while. Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley. Get us out of here, Mac.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy Ronnie Cuz Strickland.